to hum, but please don't sing out loud. Just, you can hum. The humming vibration is just as potent and powerful, says my ancestors. So please hum along. So this morning, my reading comes from an excerpt from a book that I found from the you know, that book thing we have going where you know, free books and leave a donation. Well, there was a free book there called The Power of Forgiveness. It's been in our bookstore for ages, and I thought, well, that's the theme. Let me go ahead and read this book, and I did, and it was quite comprehensive. So Kenneth Briggs, on pages 66 and 67. He says these words. One day, the log jam breaks. The offended party says it is possible to release the pain and suffering and fury that churned inside. The explanation goes something like this. Sufficient trust has been restored to go on. The greater good of the family is a key motive. Life may never be the same between them, but they can build anew. They share a love whose largesse can overcome betrayal. I forgive you, the offended says, but at the same time I cannot be expected to forget. Remembering, of course, makes stability hard to retain. If the offended one lets go of the grievance, the slate would apparently be wiped clean. Then suppose something suspicious happens. The former offender comes home late 3 nights in a row. Even if the reason for the lateness has nothing to do with infidelity, the circumstances cause the partner to wonder, then perhaps to remember. Memory can then reopen the sluiceway between the unforgetting and the unforgiving. So long as the offense is lodged in the memory bank, it can be summoned by any number of associations. How could a sound mind not forget? Forgiving, unforgiving, and forgetting strike me as analogous to the states of matter that elements have, that dynamic capacity to change from liquid to solid to gas and back again. Could that be a trinity of forgiveness? Among Jesus' 7 last words recorded in the Bible, one speaks directly about his persecutors. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He offers that gift of grace without conditions, and we might imagine if it was someone else left to die by a cruel army, they might say something like, Father, don't be in a hurry to forgive them because they know perfectly well what they've done. And still another person might have drawn on the urgency to say, Father, forgive them, but don't forget they're capable of such a thing.
Amen.
Thank you, Marty. Woo, I have not preached from this pulpit since March of 2020. It feels good to be here today. I had a hard time sleeping last night. Yep. We are here together and we are moving forward. We are and will get past this pandemic. We are hopeful today that this rebirth taking place in our country and in this congregation, a rebirth that is evolving us, I hope, to be kinder and gentler human beings. And here at UUCA, we have our own rebirth, the landscaping outside and our memorial garden, the building construction inside. All of this upgrading and beautifying shows that we are a congregation that's on the move. It makes me happy, makes me proud. A congregation leaning into the present, not shying away from the present, and into the future. So that has me excited today. And I must say that as I look out at you with your masks on, I cannot always tell who's behind those masks. And sometimes church in this time feels like a costume party. But costume parties can be fun. And that's what we do in a congregation. We make lemonade out of lemons. And so today I want to talk about something that is sour and sweet, a topic that has lemons and lemonade, depending on when you decide to confront it. I'm talking about forgiveness, our theme this month. What is forgiveness? What is forgiveness? Forgiveness, the Greater Good Science Center says, is a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. So this is a complex topic. Complex, you look at that word, it means many interwoven threads, like braiding hair. It's complex. It runs deep. And so I want to narrow my search a little bit this morning because you can go down a rabbit hole with forgiveness. So today I'm going to discuss forgiveness in general terms, and I'm going to share why we should choose forgiveness over bitterness. I am not, however, going to talk directly about forgiving yourself, self-forgiveness. That deserves its own space. And I'm not going to talk much about when you are the perpetrator and need to ask for forgiveness or make amends. That also deserves its own space. So much of what I'm going to share this morning comes, as I said, from the book The Power of Forgiveness by Kenneth Briggs. And this book highlighted to me that this is a very tough topic for human beings, complex, many levels to forgiving. And in some situations, complete forgiveness, in a literal sense, is not possible because in some situations the depth of experience, of pain experienced by the victim is so deep and sometimes so ancestral that it may take lifetimes to get past those hurts. So I'm not going to sugarcoat the message today about forgiveness. It's hard. It's dealing with the shadowy aspects of others and ourselves. And it's also necessary to forgive if you're on a spiritual path, and I believe all humans are on a spiritual path. So forgiveness, you look it up, it's found in all the world religions, and why is that? It seems to be a part of the human DNA. And if you think about that, you think of it from a scientific perspective, it's there, or a social perspective, it's there so the tribe can move on from its conflicts. It's there so the tribe can survive. Otherwise, there would be no one left in the tribe if people didn't deal with their conflicts. And of course, there's bits of retribution and revenge that are there. And sometimes, in tribes, you have issues of retribution and revenge. Sometimes, hey, you took this from me, I take this from you. That has happened. So it exists, forgiveness, retribution, revenge. It exists because it is how we communicate, how we stay in community. But even still, after practicing forgiveness or retribution, sometimes the pain remains. Oftentimes the pain remains. And that work is individual work, to move beyond retribution and anger. There's nothing the system can do. There's generally never enough the system can do to make amends for the hurt that has been caused to someone's psyche, soul. And so yes, we must make amends, forgive ourselves, but the work really is for us. And forgiving does not necessarily mean that the relationship does not end, that someone is not punished, pushed out of the tribe or the community, or sent away for a moment to reflect, come back when they're ready. It doesn't mean that. Today, though, I'm talking about your work in process. When you are ready, when you decide that you're ready to heal, then you have to make forgiveness a part of who you are. Now, it's interesting when you go to the Bible in the New Testament, that's part of our tradition. There's a story where Jesus is asked by one of his followers how many times he should forgive someone. And a young Jewish rabbi, tells him in the tradition it's 7 times. 7 is a sacred number in Judaism. Later, the disciple comes back to him, and then Jesus says 70 times 7. Now, to get this, of course, you have to understand Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, where numbers matter. And the number 7 is symbolic of completion. And so it was a tradition for a person to forgive 7 times. The actual etymology of the word forgiveness means to give up completely. Completely forget. So saying 70 times 7 is probably not saying forgive him 490 times, but rather it's the writer's hyperbole. It's an emphatic statement. How many times should I forgive him, teacher? The response, many, 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 many times. 70 times 7. So that's many, 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 until you completely forget. Until it has no power over you. So in this context, the writer is saying that if we cannot forgive the perpetrator and let it go completely, then we are still, in fact, yoked to them and truly not free. They still control you. You are effectively still giving your power away to the abuser. Now, science is showing that this is literally not possible for some people. It's showing that some are just born with more forgiving natures. It comes easy for some people, while others just hold on to stuff. I wish I knew the answer for that. It's just the way they are. Of course, environment and situation play a role. But research shows that there is a predisposition for how long we hold on to our hurts. So there is no timeline for how long somebody hurts. But of course, if we don't deal with those hurts over a long period of time, they can turn toxic. And sadly, as a minister, I have seen people stuck in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, unable to let go of the past because the pain, the loss runs deep. As Unitarian Universalists, we make space for those whose hearts have been hardened by life, those deeply hurt by trauma. We make space for people where they are on their journey, and we encourage them to find ways to forgive. Now, truthfully, I think the writer in the New Testament exaggerated the point. Of course, forgive 70 times 7. I can imagine the follower of the rabbi, he'd say, man, that's totally impossible. Are you kidding me? Nobody can do that. Exactly, the wise teacher would say. And that is why everyone must do that. We all need grace. Forgive them, they know not what they do. That is all of us as human beings at one time or another. We all do harm. We are all caught in a complicit web of cause and effect, clashing and colliding realities of misperceptions. We are all victimizers and victims. That abuser was abused. That molester was molested. That racist was fed a lie of superiority. Grace is needed. The retired minister, the great minister from Riverside Church in New York City, Reverend Dr. James Forbes, he said, we have all drawn from the bank of grace. We've all needed to forgive and make amends. We've all been accuser and been accused. Grace is needed. When I read that, I thought about how many people pause before a meal to say a grace. And that's exactly what grace is. You pause and you make space for the sacred. That's what we do as Unitarian Universalists. We pause and make space for the sacred. And we call out the evils of everyday life. We call out and demand justice in Charleston and Sandy Hook, places where people had to ask for forgiveness and be forgiven. 9/11, the Capitol Gazette, Selma, justice for Sandra Bland, reparations for slavery, colonialism, the Holocaust. We call out and demand change for the mass incarceration of millions of minorities. On and on and on the evils go. Humanity's inhumanity. Lots of victims. And we call it out, but we are all victims. And grace asks us to pause and look at the players and their motivations and their actions. They know not what they do. And neither do we all the time. As first world people, living on the backs of the third world workers who work for pennies, laboring for our technology, our coffee that we love, our rice. Grace is needed by all. Compassion, or if you look that word up, with passionate sympathy, is needed by all. Yes, we seek justice, but we cannot forget mercy and humility. Marianne Williamson says, believe in good, proclaim it and stand up for it, and hold evil accountable, but let redemption win. Now, the Jewish novelist and writer Elie Wiesel, he suffered a lot of trauma, the Holocaust. And he says he cannot forgive the German government for what they allowed. He cannot understand how a great country like Germany, where some of the smartest and wisest people in history were born, could let their country be corrupted by a party that chose to intentionally marginalize and annihilate millions of people. He says he cannot forgive nor forget. On the other hand, Nelson Mandela has a similar story, and yet he made forgiveness an imperative once released from prison and voted into power. So I understand both. I prefer the latter. It's the way I'm made. Mandela's example, King's example, Gandhi's example. For me, I have to try to forgive. I have to try to let go completely. Why? It's not just because I'm programmed that way. It feels like the right thing to do. There's a reason forgiveness exists in our culture. I said, of course, it's to help sustain the tribe. But it's also there because it feels good when we're ready. Just like love, generosity, mutuality, lovely words, they feel good when they're practiced. I believe it is our default as human beings when we are safe and secure. I believe we're all born good at our core. You look at any baby, that's good. But we've become corrupted by people, places, things, leading us to victimizing others in small or large ways. And that's what I'm going to talk about more, evil, the next time I speak, and doing less harm. So I believe these lovely words, harmony, wholeness, love, peace, generosity, they vibrate at a higher level of existence, a level that we must seek to live at each day. Not easy. But at this level, you transcend the dichotomy of us versus them. It becomes all of us. And I feel this deep down in my soul. That higher frequency is calling us back to wholeness, back to our best selves. And we cannot be completely whole if we do not forgive and let go. Martin Luther King said that forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a permanent attitude. He said even more in a sermon in 1957, Loving Your Enemies. Of course, this was early King, but he said this: the person who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. He declared, the degree to which we're able to forgive determines the degree to which we're able to love our enemies. And then there's a celebrated monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, one of my favorites, who protested against Vietnam, had to go into hiding. He said this: compassion must be nurtured from the inside rather than imported through willpower. Forgiveness will not be possible until compassion is born in your heart. Even if you want to forgive, you cannot forgive. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh believes that hate grows out of fear and pride and ignorance, prejudice, and misunderstanding mostly. And that when you look with compassionate eyes, you see clearly the vulnerability and fragility in all humanity. You see yourself. And over time and practice, by seeking an end to your own suffering, seeing yourself as divided and not one with others, that's where the suffering manifests. Individuation. Seeing your oneness, he believes compassion leads you to an ultimate kind of love and acceptance of the good, the bad, the ugly in life, while at the same time fighting against it. Paradoxical indeed. But for me personally, forgiving is not forgetting. I understand the point great teachers were trying to make. It's not forgetting. You can't erase a memory from your brain unless, your brain gets shocked or you have neurological disease. So we remember. Forgiving completely and forgetting contextually for me means that whatever it is, it no longer holds sway over you. There is no negative karma or negative action or negative energy attached to it any longer. Figuratively speaking, the tumor in your spiritual body is now benign or even gone, making you healthy. And more than likely, even when triggered, it does not grow or come back. You've learned how to manage the symptoms. You are taking better care of yourself, and you refuse to live in fear of life or death, because that is at the heart of trauma. So you keep letting go when necessary. But sir, he hurt my family, he devastated me, slaughtered my people, you were reckless, you lied, forgive 70 times 7. Forgive again and again, completely until it has no power over you. I've lied, I've hurt people. My people have been reckless. Make amends. Spend your life making up for that misery. But the message is the same for you. Forgive 70 times 70. Now, it's been proven in hundreds of health studies that practicing compassion and forgiveness is good for your mental and physical body. Lowers blood pressure and heart disease. Hundreds of studies have shown this out. So I also believe it's good for what I would call your spiritual body. So make forgiveness a way of living if you can. Making space for compassion and forgiveness means you're trying to understand the deeper complexities in life. When you get stuck in judgment, that means you are stuck in the matrix of misunderstanding and suffering. Forgiveness makes you compassionate, and compassion leads to freedom, and freedom is love. Freedom is unconditional love. Now here at UUCA, if we want to find new ways of bringing people into our community, we have to be forgiving. When people in the community break their vows or their covenants, forgiveness is necessary. Dr. Robert Enright, he's a developmental psychologist who also suffered a major trauma in his life. He said that if we don't practice forgiveness, after a while, there'll be no one left to bring in your community. And Kenneth Briggs, the author of the book, Power of Forgiveness, he said that a culture or an individual that is unforgiving is destined for destruction. It's been proven that being unforgiving harms the individual, and systemically we know how it has harmed society. He says forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. It shows character and greatness to acknowledge where we have fallen short of our best. And yes, we must hold people accountable for their actions, but forgiveness must also be a part of the healing process. Amen. Finally, what does forgiveness feel like? I've talked about that some. It's not forgetting, but it's kind of forgetting. It feels good. The sharpness of what happened dulls. The thing has no impact on you. The hurt does not anger you any longer or fill you with that heaviness. You almost feel separate from it, distant, as if it was a lifetime ago. That lump in your chest, in your throat, it doesn't bring you to tears of anger. You don't lose sleep over it. You don't want revenge. When someone speaks about it, directly or indirectly, you don't feel uncomfortable. You feel compassion and a deeper understanding of yourself as a result of the process and the complexity involved in the situation. You can see the other person's perspective. This is putting on new glasses and seeing things anew. And don't you think in this country, we have to try something new. We're just on this repeat cycle of people hurting people. The stuff that we're doing, the stuff that we're trying, it's not working. So we have to try something new. How about what the sages have said all these years? Practice forgiveness, practice compassion, look within yourself, see yourself in the other. I'm off my script now, look out. What if we could see ourselves as nature? Because what does nature teach us, but if anything, but to let go? Because there is no summer without fall. No spring without winter. Nature is always letting go. And therefore we must. I must. I hope I said that 7 times. I must forgive 70 times 7. Amen.